Welcome to today's presentation, A Strategic Approach to Workplace Drug Testing, the Power of a Comprehensive Program. I'm Jessica Polk of the Current Consulting Group, and we'd like to thank today's webinar hosts, Premier Biotech and Current Consulting Group, for putting on this webinar session today. We would like to first recognize Premier Biotech for sponsoring today's webinar presentation. Premier Biotech provides customized drug screening services for their customers in criminal justice, corrections, workplace, health and human services, and clinical-based programs. Their commitment is to deliver the most innovative and flexible testing menu of drugs of abuse. And so we'll hear more about their product later in their products later in our webinar presentation. And from Premier Biotech, we have Jenna Stainbrook, and we also have from Current Consulting Group, Bill Current. Just a little brief introduction on our presenters today. Jenna is responsible for workplace sales and partnership at Premier Biotech. And as we mentioned a little bit about them before, Premier Biotech is a leading provider of rapid drug testing diagnostic devices backed by CAP Forensic accredited laboratories located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they provide customized drug screening services for customers, as I mentioned before, in criminal justice, corrections, workplace, health and human services, and clinical-based programs. Bill Current is with us as well today, and he is the founder of Current Consulting Group, and he also is on the NDASA Board of Directors. He's the former Vice President of Consulting at Employee Information Services, and he was the Executive Director of American Council for Drug Education and the former Director of the Institute for a Drug-Free Workplace. And so we also just wanted to make sure that you all are aware that today's presentation includes continuing education credits from HRCI and for SHRM for those who attend today's live webinar presentation. So if you're interested in those credits, please stay with us for the entire presentation. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to Bill.
All right, thank you, Jessica, and welcome everyone to today's webinar presentation. Excuse me. First of all, I'm really excited to be co-presenting with Jenna. Jenna and I have done webinars before in the past, and she is a wealth of information. So I'm going to put her on the spot and just say, give us any questions that you have. Between the two of us, we could probably cover just about any questions you have. We're going to touch on some specific issues in today's presentation, and here you can see the agenda, but ask us any questions about drug testing, about oral fluid testing, about rapid testing in particular, about any of the trends that are currently a part of what's going on in the industry right now. And for the presentation that I'm launching into now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my camera so that you can see me as we're talking and make it a little bit less formal. Now, one thing I want to point out is that during today's presentation, I'm going to refer to some survey results. Every year, the Current Consulting Group conducts a survey of the drug testing industry. So recently, back in April at the annual conference of NDASA, we released the results of our 27th annual survey. Hard to believe it's been 27 years since we started that. And we're grateful for Premier Biotech as one of our corporate sponsors of the survey. And there's going to be some great information. I think you're going to like it that I'm going to share during the presentation today. But as part of that survey, we do what we call sort of a survey within the survey. It's the brand name recognition portion of the survey, where we ask people in the industry to please name the top 3 brands that come to mind when you think of laboratory urine testing or laboratory oral fluid testing. And for the umpteenth year in a row, Premier Biotech was recognized as the #1 brand in rapid result oral fluid testing. Now, the strength of their brand is evident in the fact that, one, they scored #1 in that category, but they bleed into other categories as well. Sometimes in areas that they don't actually have a service, but they get credit for providing that so they get mentioned in other categories. So it's a tribute to the strength of the Premier Biotech brand. But they were #1 yet again this year in the rapid result oral fluid testing category. So congratulations, Premier Biotech, for that. Now let's launch into today's presentation. And if I can, I always try to sprinkle in one of my favorite artists to, just sneak him in on a slide. So here's Bob Dylan, of course. And back in 1964, he released the song the times they are changing. If you've seen this new movie about Bob Dylan, it's kind of interesting how this song came to be. But we're living in a time when everything's changing, thanks in large part to the legalization of marijuana. That's definitely having an impact on drug-free workplace programs, drug-free workplace policies, drug testing. There are many, many states now that have legalized marijuana either for recreational use. I think we're up to 24, and 40 that have legalized it for medicinal use. Other states, including those ones, but other states have decriminalized possession of small amounts, personal use amounts, they call it, of marijuana. So that's having a big impact on the workplace and on employers' efforts to have drug-free workplace programs. And part of that is sort of resulting in a shift, if you will, if you look at that third bullet, a shift from drug use detection to impairment identification. You're seeing a lot more emphasis, and part of this is due to the language in many state marijuana laws. We're seeing sort of a focus on not just the result of the drug test, but how close can we correlate that result, a positive result, with accusing somebody or suspecting that somebody is impaired on the job. And so because of that, we're seeing a movement toward drug testing methods that have the ability to detect very recent drug use. We'll talk about that in detail in today's presentation. But I think that's going to become the norm in the future, primarily oral fluid testing, because it has that ability to detect use within minutes after somebody's used a drug. And then the window of detection is shorter, it's tighter than compared to urine testing and certainly hair testing, which I think have their places, of course. But I think there's still going to be sort of this movement toward oral fluid testing and rapid oral fluid testing in particular. And I base that opinion on the results that we've seen over the last, say, 6 or 7 years in our industry survey that I referred to, where especially since October of 2019, when the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration came out with their oral fluid regulations for drug testing of federal employees. And that sort of led to the DOT oral fluid regulations that came out that we're still waiting for a couple of labs to be certified before they go into full effect. But that's sort of creating this movement toward oral fluid testing, in part because the government's endorsed it, but also in large part because of the cultural trends that were in society that are sort of moving employers toward this impairment identification motivation for doing drug testing as opposed to just drug use. Now, I've left Bob Dylan on there long enough, so let's move on. So we're going to start out with some current trends in workplace drug use and drug testing. There are a lot of numbers on the page. I'm not going to go through all the numbers on the next several slides, but this is here for you. You see the sources down at the bottom if you want to look them up yourself. But you can see that between 2020 and 2023, the number of people who admit to using marijuana increased from about 49 million to just over 61 million. Now, you're thinking 2023, that's old stuff there. Well, the way this works is when the results of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health come out in 2025, they'll reflect 2024. So references to 2023 are from the 2024 report that came out. It's always 1 year behind the date on the report. So these are the latest numbers that we have. The 2025 report will probably come out, I'm guessing, sometime later in the year, like September timeframe, maybe August, but we'll see those later in the year. Last year's report came out very late. So just depends on how things in the government are going and how they affect the release of these kinds of results. And I want to point out that it's not just the marijuana issue. You can see that millions of people are also abusing opioids, either heroin or prescription pain relievers, etc. That was evident in the 2023 stats that were released last year. Now, more pertinent to the workplace, 70% of all adults with a substance use disorder, that's sort of the that's the phrase that we're using nowadays, sort of the politically correct phrase for what we used to call a drug abuser, but substance use disorders. 70% of all adults with a substance use disorder are employed. And that's approximately 9% of full-time employees and 17% of unemployed adults. Now, that number is very important because if you're trying to fill positions, and many industries are still struggling to fill all the positions that they have, especially when we head into, seasonal hiring, et cetera, you're hiring typically from the unemployment line, so to speak. And a larger percentage of people who are unemployed have substance use disorders versus those who are full-time workers or part-time workers. But you can see even among full-time workers, 9% admit to having some type of substance use disorder. And the industries are all across the board. I just put these top three up there: accommodation and food services, art, entertainment, and recreation, and construction industries. For many years, construction was always number one in this category, but that's changed a little bit over the last few years, where you see as sort of the previous generation of young people who have higher levels of drug use are entering into the workforce, into food services typically, or construction, you see those percentages increasing in terms of the percentage that have a drug problem. Now, workplace specifically, right? There was a survey that came out, this was about 2 years ago now, a survey of about 500 people who were employed who admitted that they were regular marijuana users. And a lot of the stats that we have today pertain to marijuana, but as I mentioned, it's not just a marijuana problem, okay? But in this particular survey, it was 500 employees who admitted to being regular marijuana users. 31% confessed that they use marijuana during their commute to work. So they're arriving at work in the morning already high on marijuana. 48%, this is really stunning, right? Almost half, 48% admitted to using pot at work, either during their breaks or while they were actually working. And there were some other studies you see below there, a different study, 1 in 5 admitting to using marijuana recreationally during work hours, and more than 13% said they use marijuana at work more than once a month. So it's a problem, and there are the sources down below. You'll get that when you get the recording. You'll be able to see those sources, and you can look them up yourself. But here's what I like about when it comes to how to address the problem and using drug testing as a way to mitigate the negative effects of drugs in the workplace, is the very fact that drug testing works. It works to deny or to deter people from using drugs, from showing up to work under the influence of drugs. And it also is an effective way to help people who are struggling with a drug problem. So the first set of statistics you see there, the two first bullets, 40% of drug users who were employed, who were part of a survey the federal government did, 40% said they would not work for a company that conducts random testing, and 30% said they wouldn't apply for a job that conducts pre-employment testing. And you may be thinking, well, then I need to stop doing pre-employment testing because I need those workers. Well, just the opposite, in my opinion. You don't need those workers because they're costing you a lot of money. When we ask people, employers, we have a second survey that comes out every year in the second part of the year called the Employer Drug Testing Survey. And when we asked employers what are the benefits that they're getting out of drug testing, 87% said a safer workplace, 63% said they hire better quality employees, 61% said a better company reputation, 53% said that drug testing improves productivity. And of course, that's going to be true if you're hiring better quality workers who are safer and not involved in workplace accidents, okay? And then finally, this is the last one. I didn't put a lot of information on here. This comes from the Journal of Addiction Medicine. Drug testing should be used widely in addiction treatment settings. Within the treatment community, they do consider drug testing to be a very effective way to deter drug use as people are going through treatment, but also as a way to help them kind of kick the habits that they're in and get to the place where they don't crave the drugs anymore. Again, the source is down there at the bottom, but the bottom line to this slide is that drug testing works. It works to help people not come to work under the influence, not use drugs while at work, and for those who have a problem, maybe to motivate them to kick the habit and become a non-drug using employee. So this leads to the question of, if you're going to do drug testing, when do you do it? Under what circumstances? And so these results again are from our industry survey. And we asked, what does your company when does your company conduct drug testing? And I take that back. I said the industry survey. This is the employer survey from last year. But you can see right in the middle, that light blue bar, 89% said they conduct pre-employment testing. I've got another stat coming up on pre-employment testing in a minute, but that's the most common reason for conducting a drug test. And then you can see kind of grouped around it, 70% post-accident testing, 71% random testing, and 75% said reasonable suspicion testing. So pre-employment screening, still critically important. Got some stats coming up on that. But other types of post-hire testing remain very popular and in common use. Now, we did ask the question, how are your pre-employment testing volumes this year compared to last year? So this would have been 24 comparing to 2023. And you can see in the middle, the dark blue bar, 40% said the same. So it hadn't gone down. 29%, the green bar, actually said it's gone up. They were doing more pre-employment testing. And that could be a sign that the economy was improving for their industry and they were hiring more people. Could have been a reflection of seasonal hiring, etc. Only 20% said their pre-employment testing volumes were down. 11% weren't sure. But you can see that the takeaway here is that most companies continue to conduct pre-employment testing, and they continue to either do it at the same levels as previous years, or actually, in some cases, 29% say it's actually gone up. Now, there was a great report that came out from First Advantage. They're a large drug testing company. I know that Premier Biotech works with them, but they did a study of their clients who had stopped or paused their pre-employment drug testing program, and to see what impact that policy decision had on other outcomes like post-accident drug testing results. And so you can see that according to this report from First Advantage, there was an increase. Look at the second bullet. During the same period, nearly all industries saw an increase in positive results from post-accident drug testing among the companies that chose to either pause or discontinue pre-employment screening. And then quoting from their report, clients that perform pre-employment drug screening experienced a 17% increase in post-accident positivity from 2019 to 2020. Meanwhile, part of the same quote, clients that did not perform pre-employment drug testing saw their post-accident rates more than double during the same period. So there was an increase, even if you were still doing pre-employment testing, but it more than doubled for those companies that chose not to screen job applicants for drugs any longer. And maybe they just cut out marijuana, but nonetheless, it had this negative impact on safety in the workplace. So what I want to do now is introduce our first poll question. I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica to ask the question. You'll have a chance to respond, and then we'll read the results. Go ahead, Jessica.
All right, thanks, Bill. Does your company conduct pre-employment testing in the following circumstances? So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll so that you can get started on this. You can select any that apply. So yes, for all positions, yes, but only for safety sensitive positions, yes, but not for rehires, people who previously worked for you. We do not conduct pre-employment testing, or we do not screen applicants for marijuana. So please feel free to select any that apply, or just one if you want, but we appreciate your participation in this poll. Okay, it looks like we're slowing down with this. We thank you again. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So we had 59% of our participants today said yes for all positions. They conduct pre-employment testing. 28% said yes, but only for safety sensitive positions. 1% said yes, but not for rehires. 10% said we do not conduct pre-employment testing, and 12% do not screen applicants for marijuana. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and I'll send it back to you, Bill.
Well, thank you, Jessica. That was very interesting. Thank you for participating in that poll. And if you'd like us to include, we can include those poll responses in the post-event email that you get. So they're very interesting. Thank you very much. Now let's launch into some drug testing specific issues now. And the first thing I want to say is that we're living in the age of lots of options when it comes to drug testing. When I first got into the business back in the late 1980s, it was really just lab-based urine testing. That was the game. That's what DOT migrated to. And so that's really what most employers were doing. And it's still very popular, of course, but you have, lab-based oral fluid, hair testing, which is a lab-based test, but you also have instant urine testing, and growing in popularity very quickly, instant or rapid result oral fluid testing. And I provided this chart in today's slide deck. So you're going to get this. You'll have some time to to digest it, but it compares urine, oral fluid, and hair testing in several major categories. These are the things that you're going to look for when you're trying to decide which testing method is best for us, right? Is it available as both a lab test or a rapid test? You can see hair testing generally is only a lab-based test. There is some technology out there, not widely available yet, but there is, you know, it's basically urine and oral fluid that are available both as a lab test and as a rapid result test. Window of detection with urine, you're looking at 3 to 4 days at the cutoff levels that we typically use. The urine, THC, for example, remains detectable in urine for, you know, up to a couple of weeks. But at the cutoff levels we're talking about that we typically use and that many state laws require, we're looking at 3 to 4 days. The big difference is with oral fluid, where the window of detection with a rapid result or point of collection, POCT, is about 12 hours for THC, okay? That's the window of detection. So a much tighter window of detection. This is particularly important if you're in a state that has a very restrictive marijuana law and you're looking for a shorter window of detection type test so that you can determine that people don't have marijuana in their system while they're on the job, right? With lab-based testing, you're going to get a slightly wider window of detection. As you see there, 24 plus hours. It's going to depend on the drugs that we're talking about, right? And then with hair, the big difference is there is you've got a lag time of about 7 to 10 days before drugs become detectable after usage in someone's hair sample, but it's going to remain detectable for about 90 days. Now, if they're a chronic drug user, that individual could probably test positive at any point. But if he's smoking a joint or two during his lunch break, the hair test isn't going to detect that usage. You want something that has that ability to detect recent use, which is the next category down. So with urine, you've got a lag time of say 6 to 7 hours before the metabolite of cannabis or THC becomes detectable in that individual's urine specimen. With hair, as I mentioned, it's going to be several days. But with oral fluid, because you're detecting the parent drug, you're detecting the drug itself, not a metabolite, which takes several hours to become detectable. Then with oral fluid, you're able to detect the drug within minutes, say 10 to 15 minutes after somebody smokes a joint, for example. They go out to their car during their lunch break, they smoke a joint or two, they come back into the workplace, you know, 30 minutes later, let's say their lunch break is over and they get behind the wheel of the forklift or whatever safety sensitive job that they're doing, and they can't do it, right? They're under the influence, they're impaired. We're not accusing them of being impaired based on the drug test result, but with oral fluid and with a rapid oral fluid test, like oral tox, for example, which we'll talk about in a minute, you're going to detect that usage more likely. And you're going to be able to remove that person performing a safety sensitive function so that you're not putting anybody's safety or lives perhaps in jeopardy. And then the legality, there you can see that oral fluid testing is legal in virtually every state when it comes to lab and almost every state when it comes to point of collection or rapid testing. Urine, of course, is legal in every state, and it's available under the federal regulations as well as oral fluid, lab-based. And then in hair, most states, but not all states. And I'll explain a little bit more about the nuances between different types of states. But as I mentioned, there are sets of regulations in place for lab-based urine, lab-based oral fluid, but not for hair. Okay, so and virtually all drugs are available or can be detected in all three samples. Now, going back to our survey again, we asked the question, what drug testing method do you currently use in your workplace program? And you can see that long blue bar, 92% said lab-based urine testing. That's not a surprise. It's pretty steady. It's right there in the 90 to 92% range year after year after year. What's interesting, though, is that when you look at instant or rapid oral fluid testing compared or in addition to lab-based oral fluid testing, you're looking at 53%. And I can tell you from doing this survey for the last 27 years, but in particular over the last 5-6 years, that 53% is a significant jump up. So we're seeing an increased interest in drug testing providers offering oral fluid testing, but we're also seeing an increase in employers who are using it. And that's what you see here. 53% combined say they use instant oral fluid and or lab-based oral fluid testing. That's a significant jump. Oral fluid testing really is what most people consider to be where we're going as an industry. And I want to point that out for a couple of different reasons. When DOT, or I should say when SANSA came out with their oral fluid regulations back in October of 2019, as part of the preamble to the regulations, they predicted that within 3 to 4 years, 25 to 30% of all federal employees would be tested with oral fluid. And that if DOT adopted it, which they did eventually a year later, when DOT adopts it, the transition rate from urine to oral fluid would be about the same 25 to 30%. What we're seeing though through our survey is that the transition, even before the DOT regulations go into full effect, right? Excuse me, you can't use the DOT regulations yet to do oral fluid testing. It's close, but we don't have those 2 labs certified yet. But we're already seeing a migration toward oral fluid testing. This is in part to some of the restrictive laws that exist in some states when it comes to marijuana. You're all probably familiar with the 2 laws that went into effect January of 2024 for California and Washington that actually prohibit employers from testing job applicants for marijuana using a testing method that can only detect the metabolite of marijuana as opposed to the parent drug. Well, with oral fluid, you're detecting the parent drug. So oral fluid testing becomes the only option you have as an employer in California and in Washington for pre-employment testing that includes marijuana. Now in California, that same restriction applies to post-hire testing. In Washington, it's only pre-employment. My point here though is that there are certain trends, some of them are legislative trends, some of them are cultural trends that are really sort of pushing employers and providers toward oral fluid testing, which is a great segue into our next poll question, Jessica. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. And we are ready for our next poll question. Would you consider using oral fluid testing? Again, we're going to give you the option to select all that apply. And we'll go ahead and launch your options here. Yes, we already use lab-based oral fluid testing. Yes, we already use rapid result oral fluid testing. Yes, but only in addition to urine testing. Yes, but I would like to learn more about it, or not at this time. So feel free to share the options that are best for you. All right, we're going to go ahead and share those results with you now. And it looks like we've got 31% said yes, we already use lab-based oral fluid testing. 38% use rapid result oral fluid testing. 26 said that they would use it in addition to urine testing. 11% said yes, but I would like to learn more about it. And 17% said not at this time. We'll hide these results and send it back to you, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the next one. And Jenna, if you could, you probably had your mic muted, but if you could jump on and help me with this next slide. This kind of compares the difference between the key differences between lab-based oral fluid testing and rapid oral fluid testing. And you notice I've sprinkled in some references to oral talks, but maybe kind of help walk us through these two comparisons.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Bill. So rapid oral fluid testing, just like it says in the name, right? You're going to have those initial results within minutes. So if you're looking to make quick employment decisions, rapid oral fluid drug testing might be a great solution for you. And that's on the post-employment side and also on the pre-employment side. So we're seeing a lot of adoption in both pre and post-employment. Again, because speed is becoming more and more important. As Bill mentioned, there's a lab-based oral fluid option, right? And you're going to have those results in 2 to 5 days. They're both going to test recent use detection, right? So the window of detection generally are very similar. We always talk about with THC, as Bill mentioned, right? With oral fluid, you're going to be detecting use within hours instead of days. So those are both very similar between rapid and oral fluid drug testing. When Bill mentioned the different cutoffs, right? It's very important to know what those cutoffs are. So with rapid oral fluid drug testing, you have your screening cutoffs on the device. But if you have individuals that have an inconclusive read on the device, okay, no problem. Oral tox can be sent directly to the lab for confirmation testing. So you're sending that to the laboratory very similarly as lab-based oral fluid, and it's going to go on the confirmation testing instruments. At that point, only about 5% of the oral tox samples that you have are going to need to go to the lab. So again, you're going to have your negative result 95% of the time. If this is inconclusive and you're using the full oral tox solution, which is the Oral Tox OT Scan mobile reader app, which I'll be demoing here shortly, and confirmation testing, you're going to send these devices, the inconclusives, to the laboratory, and it's going to be paperless. So again, that is another key differentiator with oral tox. So if it needs to go to the laboratory, there's an electronic process to get that directly to the laboratory. Their observed collection, and as Bill mentioned, right, with rapid oral fluid drug testing, you're able to make those hiring decisions and post-employment decisions immediately, the majority of the time. Bill touched on this a little bit with the SAMHSA regulation. Rapid result testing, not permitted for DOT at this time. Lab-based oral fluid can be used for DOT drug testing here in the near future, which we're all looking forward to.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. And I want to take you to this next slide because this is probably one of the most common questions we get asked when it comes to oral fluid testing is it legal or is it permitted in the states where we do business? So let me break it down this way. Virtually all states permit lab-based oral fluid testing, with the possible exceptions of Maine and Hawaii. Now, we used to include Vermont in our list of the states that don't permit lab-based oral fluid testing. We just double checked all 3 states recently. Vermont actually came back to us and said, because their drug testing law does not specifically prohibit lab-based oral fluid testing or rapid oral fluid testing for that matter. Let me stay with lab-based, let me stay in my lane here. And so we checked with them and they said, no, you can use lab-based oral fluid testing. You just have to use a lab that's been certified or designated by the state. And so if you're using one of those state certified, that's probably not the right word to use, but a lab that has been designated by the state to be able to conduct oral fluid testing, you're safe doing lab-based oral fluid testing in Vermont. Now, when it comes to rapid result testing, what we have found is that 2 things. One, rapid result oral fluid testing is permitted virtually everywhere that rapid urine testing is permitted, which is in most states. Now, you do run into some issues in some states with laboratory licensing laws. Even in those cases, if you're using a reader system like OT Scan, there's a way around that where you can meet the requirements of that laboratory licensing law in many cases. There are voluntary laws like here in Florida where I live, where they have very specific regulations in place for companies that voluntarily participate in their workers' comp premium discount program. Some of those states, and I only say that it wouldn't permit rapid oral fluid testing as part of that voluntary program, only because most of them basically mirror the federal regulations. And so as Jenna mentioned, rapid oral fluid testing not permitted yet under the DOT regulations. However, I will point out that outside of the voluntary drug testing law program, if you're not one, and these are not large numbers of employers in the state that participate, but if you're doing your drug testing program in Florida or Georgia or Tennessee, for example, and you're not in that voluntary program, none of those states have a restriction on using rapid result oral fluid testing. And then the last thing I'll point out is just there are workers' comp and unemployment comp regulations in virtually every state that allow employers to move to deny workers' comp benefits or claims if there's a positive drug test result. In some of those, not all of them, because most of them are not very specific in how the drug test gets conducted, but in some of them, it again sort of mirrors the DOT or the SAMHSA regulation. So you have to look at those very closely. Now, when it comes to rapid testing, and this is a little funny, slide here with all the different names out there. So I'm calling it rapid result testing, but you see instant or instant result, you see point of collection, point of care, which usually applies to other types of testing rather than drug testing. Back in the old days, when I first started, we called it on-site testing. That was very common, and then we moved away from that because it's not necessarily happening on-site at the workplace in every instance. So I sort of settled on rapid result testing, but a rapid result test is typically, as you see in the first bullet, it's a single-use device that renders an immediate positive or negative result. It's not necessarily giving you a nanogram per milliliter reading, okay? It's a It's a plus or minus, it's a positive or a negative. And then as Jenna mentioned, with oral tox, you can actually send the same sample into the laboratory to be confirmed. That's important because as you look at state laws, there are some states that require the confirmation test to be with the same sample that you did the initial screen. So look into those state laws and make sure that you're in compliance when it comes to those issues, okay? But a rapid result oral fluid test, and this is mostly true of rapid oral fluid versus rapid urine, can take place virtually anywhere, right? You don't need a secured bathroom, you don't need to turn off the hot water, put blue dye in the toilet or anything like that, because you're not dealing with the collection of a urine sample. And so anywhere that a drug test is conducted already, or at a job fair where interviews are being conducted, anywhere in the work site, you can typically do a rapid result oral fluid testing. That's what makes it so flexible. And you can do it with a professional technician overseeing the test, or you can have trained employees. Most states allow that. And in the federal regulations, when DOT came out with their regulations, that was one of the benefits of oral fluid testing. Now they're talking about lab-based, right? But with the collection of an oral fluid sample, that they highlighted was the fact that you can actually have employees trained to do it because it's so easy to do and non-invasive. Okay, so these are some key points when it comes to rapid result oral fluid testing. And here are some of the advantages, right, to rapid testing, generally speaking. I'll leave these on the screen for a minute, but I do want to point out that one of the big issues that you have with urine drug testing, and I'm a fan of urine drug testing. I've been promoting it for over 35 years in my career, but it is subject to drug test cheating. And most of those drug test cheating methods don't work with oral fluid testing, generally speaking. But also a big reason is because the collector and the donor are face-to-face virtually the whole time, which you don't have with urine testing, right? But you do have that with oral fluid testing. So there's no opportunity to switch samples or to adulterate a sample in any way. And most of those adulteration methods that are common with urine testing don't actually work or apply when it comes to oral fluid testing. And the other thing I want to point out is just the donor experience, the ease of the collection, the quickness in getting the result, the fact that you're not, sort of invading their privacy with the collection of a urine sample, which some people consider to be invasive. All of those things improve the donor's experience, and a rapid oral fluid test makes a same-day hiring decision possible. Now, one of the challenges that we have identified in our industry surveys, I showed on this next slide, is that many drug testing providers, the professionals, identify some challenges when it comes to the logistics of scheduling a test or getting a collection conducted. And so in those cases, an alternative that is faster and easier to conduct, less invasive, not subject to drug test cheating or most drug test cheating methods, is going to be, I think, a welcome alternative for many employers. And I think you'll see a movement toward that just in terms of the ease of use and the flexibility and how the collection gets done and being able to take action on a positive result, or excuse me, on a negative result right away, right? If you're in a tight hiring market where you're competing to hire people, you want to be able to hire those ideal candidates on the spot, make a same day job offer and get them to work as quickly as possible. Rapid oral fluid testing makes that happen. Now, we did ask this question of our professionals who participated in the industry surveys: where do you see point of collection going in the next 3 years? And as you can see from the chart, 68% said they see rapid testing increasing over the next 3 years, and 28% said they see it staying the same. So it's really almost everybody sees it either staying the same or continuing to increase over the next few years. A very small number said they thought it might decrease. Lots of different places, workplace settings are ideal for rapid testing, remote business or work sites, in safety sensitive work environments, etc. But especially where fast hiring decisions are needed, you're going to see a rapid testing, and particularly rapid oral fluid testing, has a significant advantage there when you're competing to hire people and not sort of, lose ideal candidates because they had to go to an offsite collection site and then wait 2 or 3 days. I'm not criticizing that process. It's still very popular, very common, but I think we're sort of moving toward a rapid result that makes it possible for employers to make quick decisions and for the employee or the potential employee, the job candidate, when in the case of pre-employment testing, to be able to have a more enjoyable, streamlined drug test experience. Now, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenna because there was this very interesting case study that they shared with me probably 2 years ago. I wrote a paper on it. It was, I mean, the results were incredible, but I thought it'd be better for Jenna to walk us through that, and then I'll come back at the end and we'll start to wrap this up.
Yeah, absolutely. So this case study, it was a company that they hire 20,000 people annually. And they were currently, at the time, they were doing standard lab-based urine drug testing. They moved to OralTox. And as part of this case study, right, they tracked the before and after and let us share these. So we'll go into this a little bit. And so with this company, they were finding that they were extending the offers. However, only 80% of their candidates were making it to day one of start. And they're saying, what's going on, right? We have this 4 to 6 days where we're waiting to get to the final drug test results. If we move to a rapid result drug test, will we get more of these candidates to day one of work? And what they were seeing, right, is so 20% of their candidates, they weren't making a day one of work, but they were paying for the drug test, they were paying for background, I-9, and they had a $400 cost per hire price tag on each one of those applicants. So pretty quickly here, that was adding up for them, right? They had 4,000 applicants, so that was $1.6 million that they were spending per year on these candidates that weren't even making it to their first day of work. So Bill, if you go to the next slide, we'll see the results here after they transitioned to OralTox for a full year. So instead of waiting those 4 to 6 days, they had the results in 10 minutes. With that rapid result, they found that they were able to convert 10% more candidates to day one of work with OralTox than what they were able to when they had the lab-based urine when they were waiting those days. So pretty quickly, right, they found that they were saving over $750,000 just by converting more of their candidates to the first day of work by then essentially being same day eligible. And we're gonna go back here, sorry for having you guys jump around to the OT scan demo so you guys can see what this is gonna look like here. So Bill, if you wanna toss it back to me here. This is the mobile reader app, OT scan. I'm gonna turn on my screen here so you can see OralTox device. So this is OralTox, right? So this is administered on site, and you would have an employee, so typically HR, safety, a nurse, who is administering this process. They are the collector. They have the mobile reader app downloaded on their phone, and they are given a set of credentials. And we have a lot of functionality on how we can set up accounts who are rolling out with OT scan. So you'll see a location here. So I'm logged in, I am the collector. Let's say I am drug testing Bill here today. So this is going to be donor driven. But again, if you have locations across the country, we can break this out by location. We also have functionality to integrate with applicant tracking systems. So if we had an integration here, I would go ahead and select retrieve order. The order would already be in there. So information would not need to be entered on site. But I'm gonna show you guys mirror here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get donor demographic details from Bill. So Bill will give me his first name, last name, date of birth. We have a donor ID here. So this can be a lot of different things. It can be an employee ID number. It can be the last 4 of a driver's license number. Again, this is what's going to show up on the reporting. And we have a lot of flexibility on what that might be. So at this point, I'm going to get these donor details. And I'm going to turn the phone over to Bill. He's going to toggle over and sign his name. The app does offer instructions. So we see right after collectors are comfortable with the process, they don't need the instructions, but for the sake of the demo here, I'll walk through these. So I've asked Bill, have you had anything to eat or drink in the last 10 minutes? He says no, so we're gonna move on here. We just make sure it's stored at room temperature. Again, it can be stored at all sorts of temperatures, but we like to have it be stored between 36 to 86 degrees. And then it's just going to instruct the collector to say, okay, we're going to know enough saliva has been collected when the saturation indicator on the swab turns red. And now Bill will go ahead and swab his mouth, the inside the cheeks, under the tongue. And this takes about 1 to 3 minutes on average for enough saliva to be collected. Enough saliva has been collected, so we're gonna go ahead and pop this into the oral tox device. We're gonna set it upright, and we're gonna wait for the lines to run. I'm gonna do an inconclusive test today, so you guys will see what that looks like. But the next step is going to be to take a quick picture of the QR code on the device. So every oral tox device has a unique code that is going to link this device to Bill. If this has to go to the laboratory for confirmation testing, we know that this is Bill's device and his sample. So I'm going to just take a quick QR code scan, collected that, and now the collector is going to select the reason for the test. So we have all these different reasons for the test, but we're going to say this is pre-employment. And now the collector is going to sign their name. And now I am ready to interpret the drug test result. So this works very similar to depositing a check online. It's an algorithm that interprets that drug test result. 95% of the time, this is negative, right? So when I push upload, that result gets sent to either the portal, or if we have an integration, it's going to go right to the integration to the applicant tracking system. But today it's inconclusive. I'm going to show you a sample report here. So if this is the report that is viewable immediately in the portal, so you're just going to see all the information that was entered on here, the signatures, and you're going to have that result. So again, I push upload, that result is gone. Absolutely no data is saved on the phone. And this can be used for iPhones or Androids. And that result is permanently gone. Since this was inconclusive, we are going to send this to the laboratory. So there's going to be 3 extra screens here. So it's going to instruct Bill, since he was inconclusive, to scan a barcode. And Bill's just going to simply put his initials and the date on this security seal. So all sites already have the lab supplies before they begin testing. So this starts the electronic chain of custody process. We're going to go ahead and take this sticker, peel it off, put it over the top of our device. I'm going to get Bill's phone number in the case the medical review officer needs to reach out to Bill to review the results. And then the order is received. So you could print this if you wanted to send it with Bill, or if you wanted to save it for your records. But again, this order is now sitting at our laboratory. So I'm going to put the oral tox device in the specimen bag that is provided. We're going to pop it into the return shipping envelope. And again, that's sent off to the laboratory for it to be confirmed, and then for the MRO to do their work on that, and then eventually have that be sent over to you to make your final employment determination. So that is the demo. I can pass it over back to Bill here.
Okay, perfect. And let me just say to our audience that we've got just tons of questions. So the next few slides were the concluding slides. I'm going to skip over those and go straight to Q&A with Jenna. And I'm going to, if the audience will indulge me, I'm just going to fast forward here just a little bit. There's some great information that you'll have access to when you get the recording of the slides, but we don't want to not provide this information or the responses to your questions. So I'm going to kind of look over here a little bit. I apologize that you'll be looking at the side of my face a little bit as I'm doing this, but let me throw some of these questions your way, Jenna. We have a lot of them. In the past 6 months, I have heard or read about hair POCT. What do you know about that?
Yeah, great question. Premier Biotech does not have a hair POCT offering. I don't know, Bill, if you've heard of anything out there coming down.
Yeah, I think there's something in the that's being used in criminal justice. So we can find out more about that for you. If we'll take note, Frank. I saw it was from you, Frank Long. Here's a question from Kim Starr, and I may be saying your last name incorrectly, Rahib, but this is a good one. Is smoking marijuana and ingesting edibles detected the same way? Can you detect, edibles through oral fluid testing?
Yes, absolutely you can. So with oral fluid drug testing, when you're testing for THC, we're testing for the psychoactive metabolite. And when a user uses THC, it's like a paintball goes off in their mouth, right? And so oral fluid drug testing is testing for the residual drug in the mouth. So absolutely, oral fluid drug testing will pick up edibles.
Okay, so I'm just going to spare the audience looking at the side of my face here, Jenna. So, but you keep your camera on. You look better that way. Okay, so there's a couple of questions that are very similar. So I'll summarize them in saying this, which is, let's say somebody wants to use Oral Tox. How do they find a local provider that has the devices available? Somebody's saying that they love oral fluid testing, but they're having trouble finding the devices where they work.
Yeah, so I'm guessing this question's around on-site type testing, not working potentially for that employer.
Yeah.
So with OT Scan, right, that does help automate the drug testing process on site. So it's a step-by-step like I walked through. But again, we do here, right, we just want to be able to send somebody out for the drug test result. At this very moment, we do not have a solution for sending out at collection sites, but stay tuned.
Okay. And I'll take this next one, Jenna, because I have the perfect answer for it. Derek wants to know when oral fluid testing will be available for DOT. And the answer is nobody knows. So we do know that there are 2 laboratories very close to being certified. And some of you may know Patrice Kelly from ODAPSI recently joined the Current Consulting Group. And we've started Patrice Kelly Global Solutions, a division of our company. And I asked her the other day, and I mean, she's the expert of all experts. And she just sort of threw her hands up in the air and said, I don't know, nobody knows. But she did say we're getting very, very close on 2 labs being certified. Let's see. There was another one I saw here that would be perfect. Oh, here we go, Jenna. How long is an oral fluid specimen viable for analysis after the collection is performed?
Yeah, great question. So general guidance, right? When we train the teams, we say you'll want to send this, the FedEx package, right, to the laboratory as soon as you're able to. However, there is a shelf stability to it. We don't recommend it, but again, if you're not able to get it in the mail immediately, say you were to wait a week, it should be okay. But again, that's what's helpful about Oral Tox, having the saturation indicator. So we know, right, with a fair amount of confidence that if this doesn't get sent to the lab right then, we will have enough saliva in here to perform the laboratory test on it.
Okay, so kind of related to that, Jenna, but what do you say to employers that either want or required to have a split specimen?
Yeah, great question. So oral tox, we do not have the ability to have the split it at the laboratory. Though I don't know what you would recommend as far as state laws and some of those for some of those states that require it.
Yeah, and you're going to see with the DOT regulations, which of course are lab-based, that they do provide some options there. You'll see probably a lot of states adopting that. Here's a question that's like right out of, right down your wheelhouse, Jenna. This is perfect, right? So where can we purchase Oral Tox?
Great question. You can reach out to us at sales@premierbiotech.com. And then we'll work with you, of course, to get you set up.
And which laboratories do you work with for confirmation testing?
Yeah, so we have 2 laboratories here at Premier Biotech with oral tox. Right now, this goes to our laboratory in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So CAP and CLIA certified laboratory. And then we also have a SAMHSA laboratory in Arizona that is Desert Tox as well.
Okay, so, and we kind of covered this, but maybe you could just sort of elaborate on it, because there's been more than one question on this, but about the window of detection for THC. During, on the chart, I showed a difference between rapid result and lab-based when it came to, but how do you explain the window of detection for THC with oral fluid testing?
Yeah, great question. So we say it's hours, not days. So could you pick up what somebody did overnight? Potentially, but really it's going to be between 0 to about 8 hours. And if you guys have questions, we have some charts that we can share on what we see as far as the window of detection. But again, that sweet spot is going to be between 0 to 8 to 10 hours.
Okay, perfect. And there are a bunch of other questions. I can see, Jessica, that we're right at the top of the hour, so I apologize to those people that we didn't get to answer their questions online, but we're going to respond to all of the questions in an email to you. So any last words, Jenna? I see your contact information on the screen there.
Yeah, reach out again. We work with several amazing partners here across the space. So feel free to reach out and we can get you connected with where it makes sense. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Jessica, we'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you both, Bill and Jenna, for your expertise today and for walking us through the Oral Tox product. And if you have questions for our presenters, for Bill or for Jenna, as we mentioned, their contact is Jenna's is up here, or you can reach out to Current Consulting Group at info@currentconsultinggroup.com. As we mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation, this presentation was recorded and you will receive information on how to access the recording via email as well. If you're interested in continuing education credits and you've been with us for the entire hour, we will also be sending you those credit IDs so that you can apply for those credits. And so with that, this concludes today's webinar presentation. We hope that you found it informative, and we also hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for joining us.